Good afternoon, and welcome to Jeff and the Rabbi. Jeff, Rabbi, if you got confused. You know, Rabbi, for the most part, the Torah and the Jewish religion are pretty logical. Most of the rules are simple. Don't work on Shabbos, don't check out your neighbor's hot wife, and don't start worshiping a golden calf. Those all make pretty good sense to me and to probably all of us. But how about those regulations that we just don't comprehend? I decided on my own to peruse all 613 commandments and pick out the few that just didn't seem to fit or were just a bit or extremely in some points confusing.
Wow.
And I made a little list. I made about 9 of them that just didn't make any sense to me.
Just 9?
Just 9 out of the 613, so I thought I'd bring them up right now. The first 4 kind of confused me the most here. Number 1, not to erect a column in a public place of worship. Number 2, not to bow down on a smooth stone. And number 3, not to make human forms even for decorative purposes. But then right after that was a commandment that said not to be superstitious. So it seems to me if I obey 1 through 3, I could just be violating number 4. Conundrum. That's a conundrum. It is a conundrum. So I'll move on. Number 5, this one right here was kind of confusing. Not to attempt to engage the dead in conversation. Now, first, that really confused me, but it brought back a memory, and it actually makes sense to me a little bit. I remember back in the 90s, a friend of mine, Daryl, tried to speak to Jerry Garcia backstage between the first and second set. And then Jerry just got scared and took off running, probably on a long, strange trip. So it made a little bit more sense to me after that.
That's right.
Now, number 6, men must not wear women's clothing. Now, that could be confusing to some, but this definitely does not need to be clarified to me. I simply just don't have the legs for it. So that's okay. I'm fine with that one. Next are kind of confusing.
This is great.
This is good. I just want to make sure.
So I've never even understood these mitzvahs in this way, but now I am.
I'm trying to help out.
So happy I came today.
Thank God you're here because it gets even more elucidative. Number 7, a man must not remarry his wife after she has married someone else. Now, why is that one even in there? Who the heck needs to be reminded of that one? I don't think anyone has fallen for that one yet. So that one I think is just it's not even needed in the whole list. I'm down to 612. I might kick that one out of there.
Okay.
Number 8, and this one gets confusing for a lot of people, not to have sexual relations with your son's daughter, your sister, your cousin, or, get this, the hot-looking family sheep. Clearly, this should be pretty obvious to anybody outside of Opelika, Alabama. War Eagle. Yeah, that's probably not in there. That's War Eagle. That's where Auburn is, and that's the War Eagle thing. Hopefully. See, I went to Alabama, so you use that one as your joke. Okay, now, and I continue on. Number 9, the last one, thank God.
I'm not sure what he's talking about. Okay, yeah.
Number 9 is this whole thing about the red heifer. That one is a tough one, and it does not make any sense at all to anyone. But I was thinking, side note, I was, as most people know, in a Jewish fraternity in college, and coincidentally, don't know if it's coincidence or not, coincidentally, that was the nickname of the social chairman's girlfriend. Who would have thunk it? So maybe there's some kind of tie there to the Torah or not. I'm not sure, but I just thought I'd bring that out for everyone to think about. That's important. So anyway, after all of this 8 minutes of meticulous research, I came to the conclusion that God does not explain all of his commandments to his people. How are we supposed to accept a religion where we are left without elucidation for what God demands of us? Shouldn't we be told the reason for everything? Shouldn't God justify himself to us? I don't know why I'm asking you. I'm guessing you're still scratching your head over my friend Daryl and engaging the dead comment back in number 5. But I guess the trouble with you is the trouble with me. You got 2 good eyes, and I just can't see. I thought I'd bring that up because I know you went to college at some point, Rabbi Freeman. I want to see if that made any sense to you. That's all I got, and I'm going to stop right there and turn it over to you.
Here I go. No, to tell you the truth, like all the ones that you found like very difficult to understand, actually, I probably could make those be kind of rational.
I probably should have called you before I put this all down on paper then.
But there are some that really, way out there.
Right.
The ones I would have picked if I had my list. We can't mix milk and meat.
Well, but I figure you guys, that was a rabbi thing, so, well, at least the definitions.
That
later.
doesn't mean it. I mean, how do
That's
you make
true.
any sense out of that?
That's true.
Do you know Jews are not supposed to wear mixtures of wool and linen, right? How about the plain old not eating ham? Like, what's wrong with it, right? Like,
point.
what? Why those some animals yes, other animals no? I mean, like, what's the deal? No shellfish. What's with that? You know, there's just a lot of these that really don't make any sense. And the king of them all is the one that the Torah introduces as the most inscrutable, non-understandable rule is our friend the red heifer. So the red heifer is introduced with the following words. This is the law of the Torah, and the word that's used is for law means like inscrutable law. This is just the dictate of the Torah. You got to accept it. And it's a really strange thing. First of all, the red heifer is used when a person becomes ritually defiled. And that's a whole issue in and of itself. What do you mean ritual defilement? What is defilement and how does that come about? You know, how does a person get ritual? So if a person comes in contact with a dead body, they're ritually defiled. What does that mean? Then, if you want to get fixed from your ritual defilement, that's where our friend the red heifer comes in, and they have to prepare the red heifer. You slaughter it, you have to burn it up and take some of its ashes and sprinkle it on the person who is defiled.
So there's nothing to do with my social chairman friend's girlfriend in college.
I don't know.
Okay.
I never met her, so I can't comment.
All right, I just want to get back to this.
Right. But the interesting thing is that whoever prepares the red heifer becomes defiled.
Wow, okay.
So here's the rule is you're preparing a red heifer to undefile people.
So
but
your
if
friend
you're
have to
involved
get another red heifer?
Right, so if you're preparing red heifer, then you become defiled. Like, what is that all about?
That's a tough one right there, too.
So the Torah introduces this as this is unscrutable law. And it says that there are laws like that in the Torah. You should understand, some of them purposely are laws that we don't understand. Now, this whole Torah portion that we're about to read this coming week, this Torah portion is very interesting because right before it talks about the red heifer, in the previous week's Torah portion was all about a guy named Korach and his rebellion against Torah authority. He challenged Moses. He said, Moses, how come you're the boss? You know, we all exited Egypt. We all saw God. Why don't we have a more democratic process here? Who made you the boss and all that? And it was a pretty big challenge to Moses. And in the end, the ground opened up and swallowed up Korach and all of his people, and they're all gone. But before that, Korach was promoting his claim. And one of the things he did to promote his claim was he said to Moses, we all know that if a Jew has a home, they're supposed to put a mezuzah on the front door.
Right.
Right on the doorpost, you put a mezuzah. And the mezuzah contains in it a little quote, like a paragraph or two, quote from the Torah. Fine. And you put that on your doorpost, and that, fixes the whole house. So Korach says to Moses, Moses, what if I had a house full of Torahs? The whole house is just jam-packed full of Torahs. Do I need to put a mezuzah on the front door?
That's actually a good question. I think I can
Right.
understand the question.
So Moses said, yeah, because you always have to put a mezuzah on the front door.
Okay.
Korah said, Moses, come on. Isn't that ridiculous? If one little piece of quote from the Torah is good enough for a whole house, if the house is full of Torahs, it's got all the whole Torah in there many times over. Why does it need a parchment on the front door? Why does it need a quote from the Torah on the front door if the house is full of Torahs?
There we go. It's a valid question.
Valid question. And therefore, he said to Moshe, ha, ha, ha. Come on, Moshe. And he asked a bunch of questions like that.
Intentionally trying
to show that Moshe is just like making this stuff up. It doesn't make any sense. This, that, here, there. It's all phony. Phony baloney, right? So, What was the answer to Korach? The next week's Torah portion is the red heifer.
Okay, I gotcha.
So God says, listen, if you think that you need to understand this, then let's stop and ask ourselves a question. Do you really need to understand everything? And I get this all the time. Rabbi, I don't understand. If this is like this, then that is like that. How can that be? So sometimes, you want to understand the rules, and everything has rules. But sometimes you don't necessarily understand a particular rule. But it is a rule nonetheless. So what's the purpose? Why do we have this? Are we supposed to be like mindless automatons? Or are we just supposed to accept rules? The answer is that although a lot of the Torah makes sense to us, we always have to realize that we don't understand it. We always have to realize, I'm not God. As a matter of fact, this brings me back to something I mentioned a few weeks back, where the man had experienced a tragedy in his youth, and he was struggling to understand it years later as an old man. And I said to him, if you could understand it, then you'd be God.
Good point. That's a good point.
If I could open up the Torah and I understand everything in there, then why didn't I write it?
Well, it's true. And I guess the point is we all kind of should want a God that's a little bit above us. An omnipotent God is a great thing to have. And if we find that we can be on an equal level with God, he's really not much of a God.
Right.
I mean, I kind of look the same way, I remember when I got my first car when I was a kid, the mechanic who sold us the car said, you can't keep flooding the transmission like that, which I was doing quite often. I didn't understand why, but he told me, I figured he probably, since he's the mechanic, knows more about the car than me.
Right. He gets it.
Yeah.
I don't get it. As a matter of fact, it's a funny thing. We live most of our lives like that. Okay? I mean, could anybody explain many of the basic functions? If you're watching this on the internet, can you really explain the internet? The internet, it's like all these servers put together comprise the internet. Like, I'm not sure I get that. I mean, I guess I get it.
I get scared sometimes when the lightning's in the airplane. I'm just hoping the pilot's not scared. So
Yeah,
I'm
right.
just hoping he knows maybe a little better.
I like the chip. It's binary.
That's right. Yeah.
1 and 0, 1 and 0. And it's all these ones and zeros, and therefore, voila, they can tell you what temperature it is outside or something. I mean, I don't get it, to tell you the truth.
That's true. That's
right?
true.
But I do use it all the time. All the time. And I follow the rules, and they tell me you can't do like this, I don't do like that, and you can do like this, I do like that. And I do this in so many areas of my life. I do it with science. I do it with all kinds of things, I mean, come on. Half the time, you go try to deal with your taxes sometimes, Some of the laws make sense. Some of them are just like, what in the world is that all about?
I'm still trying to figure out microwave popcorn. So
Yeah, right.
I'm not even
There you
practicing
go.
yet.
There
Right.
you go. And why can't you put metal in there?
All right. Which I've tried before.
But absolutely don't do it.
No,
You
right.
don't do it. But why can't you? So we don't have a problem realizing that things are beyond us. But it's a funny thing when it comes to religion. All of a sudden, I need to understand. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, right. That's where
That
everybody
doesn't make any
lays
sense.
the law
Right?
down right there.
I can't do things that I don't
Draw a
understand.
line in the sand.
Yeah.
Right.
Why is that?
What about nuclear fusion? I want to know this religious stuff.
Now you're telling me you're not allowed to carry outside of your house on the Sabbath, but if you put a string around the neighborhood, then you can. I don't get that. Ha 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 ha.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and everyone has a jolly old time with that. Well, actually, there's supposed to be things that we don't get, because it reminds us of divine wisdom, and this is where Korach made his mistake. Korach wanted to be in control of his religion. I make the rules, and if they
That's
don't make
interesting.
sense, they're out. This has to make sense to us. What do you expect? We're going to act in a way that doesn't make sense, so therefore, it's out. And this is actually what happened with the early reform movement, because, they sat down, they had a convention, they said, look, let's look at what we got. They went through the 613 like you
Right.
did. They came to some other conclusions, like some of the stuff they said, this is wacko. Doesn't fit modern society. Out. So they crossed out a bunch of things. Then the conservative came along and they said, well, you guys were a little bit too bold, a little too aggressive. You need to back off a little bit. they said we agree when it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. But you have to wait until people like come to the comfortable position that it doesn't
let's
make
go
sense.
slowly in that.
Yeah, let's go so slowly. That's more conservative, but the same idea.
Right.
But a Torah observant Jew will revel in the fact that God is asking him to do something that he doesn't really understand, and yet he's going to do it anyway.
That's interesting, right?
Right.
And
that
that is true faith, I guess, is what that is.
That is what I mean. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't try to understand, and we're supposed to put all of our energy into understanding. This is what King Solomon said. He said, I thought that I would be very wise, but now I realize it's beyond me. That doesn't mean, though, he tried to understand, but he came to the point where he realized, like, and this with the red heifer was the one that did him in, because he could not figure out the red heifer. Okay, so it's beyond him. And King Solomon said, that's good. Now I realize it's beyond me. And what that tells me is even the one that says, like, you're not allowed to encroach on your neighbor's border, which seems to make an awful lot of sense. Not really very nice to, like, take the fence in the backyard one night and, like, move it back 5 feet.
Right.
So he just, like, ripped out 5 of his feet of his whip. That makes a lot of sense. Well, guess what? We don't really understand that one either. Because God said so, and we can't really understand even what we think that we understand.
So even the simple ones here, like that, really confused me. Truthfully, aren't as simple as they are.
They're not as simple. And although we could come up with explanations, each one of the ones you said why you can't put up a column. I'll tell you why, because they used to worship columns. They used to put up columns, totem poles, like a column. They used to worship them. So we're not allowed to do that, because if people worship that as idolatry, we're not allowed to do it. Okay, I get it. And a whole bunch of those, could be explained along those lines. In talking to the dead. They used to talk to the dead. God says it's not nice. Don't talk to the dead. Right? And it's always a one-way conversation anyway, right?
I'm not right with that one.
Although actually, according to our sources, these people used to be able, these necromancers, used to be able to, like, get the dead to talk back. But, okay, I don't know about that. I've never been there, never seen it happen, but that's what they say they could do. So I understand if they say they could do that, then we're not supposed to do that, because that's black magic and it's not so good. But even the things that we totally understand, that we absolutely understand, like I said, like not coveting and not encroaching on your neighbor's border, and just even remembering things, like all of the many things that we do to remember, like eating a piece of matzah to remember Passover and all that. And we think we understand it. We don't really understand.
I mean, as an example, I remember, back when I was a Reformed Jew, I remember people telling me, hey, the reason why we don't have to follow some of these rules anymore, because they're not pertinent anymore. The reason they would say that we weren't supposed to eat pig is because back then it was bad. It could be cooked bad, you get sick. Trichinosis. And milk and meat is because, this is what I was told, because back then they had wooden plates. And the milk would absorb into the plate, and then when you put the meat on it, it could again get you sick. So that was all. And the reason that's not important anymore is because we have plastic plates now, so we're glass plates.
Yeah, I don't know why you get sick anyway, because it seems at McDonald's they've been serving cheeseburgers and.
Good point there.
I mean, maybe people get sick from it, but they don't seem to exhibit sickness right away.
It might take about 30 years of high cholesterol, but it catches them eventually.
Right. I don't think though it's the Philly cheesesteaks and all that stuff, Yeah. So the bottom line is that we are a religion that believes that there is a great beyond. And that great beyond, there's something way beyond us, and that's God. Mm-hmm. And God determines the whole structure. Now, this is very non-existentialist. The existentialists want to believe in my experience and my world around me and all that. We believe that, no, there's a great world, like an overlay world, that is taking place. And we're working within it, and we're following all these rules of a great creator who sits beyond all of that. And we are following the rules, or running the race according to the rules that have been laid out by the organizers of the race, God. And if there's a rule, for some reason it says don't do this or do that, so be it. Because that's what we follow. Because we believe we have a soul, and the soul responds to all of these things. Very non-existentialist, but very structured, and that's what we're supposed to believe about all the mitzvahs. And that's why God takes the red heifer and he introduces the red heifer and he says, this is an inscrutable law of the Torah. And what many commentators say is, what he's saying is, this is the inscrutable law, and it's of the Torah, that the Torah itself is ultimately inscrutable. Can't really understand it.
Yeah, I mean, and I get it. There's rules in football, but that taunting rule in college football, I never understand that one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have these guys out there playing, you can't taunt after you score a touchdown. The rule makes no sense, but I guess deep down, the rules committee, it makes sense somewhere.
Right.
Your sportsmanship and whatever like that. Maybe the red heifer somewhere in there.
Right.
I don't know.
Right, but the bottom line is that we, given in our day and age, our era that we live in, we cannot do anything that we don't believe in, that we don't understand. And the truth is, what I'm saying is, if you're doing it only because you understand it, you're not really doing it.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, and I think it says two things. One, you're not really doing it, and also your life is pretty simplistic. If you're only doing the things that you can understand, maybe you need to reach out a little further and say maybe there's something greater than you out there, and maybe take a chance there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Maybe things that are a little more complicated maybe actually have more meaning.
That's right. Now that's it's beyond us, admittedly, but that's the beauty of it, is that we live ascribing to a system that is beyond us. At least we know that it does make sense if you're God, because it makes divine sense. It might not make sense to me because my mind isn't divine. Right. It can't comprehend all that. It may be of God, but it can't comprehend what God can comprehend. But it's still good to know that there is this great big system and I'm part of it. And that's a wonderful thing.
Well, that's good stuff. I mean, because it is, because sometimes, and again, you're right, is people they could go through the whole thing and find, look at this. If you can't do this, this whole thing's fake. You can always find something there that doesn't make sense.
I can't accept that.
Of course, the things they accept in their own life are
Right.
so far beyond that. Wait a minute, I don't get it. So you don't like that it says this right here, but look what you're doing over there.
Right.
So I guess it is just picking and choosing doesn't work too well with religion.
Right. No.
You either believe it or you don't believe it, and I guess that's it.
That's the system.
Good stuff. All right. Well, I learned something again today. Wow. Maybe I'll stick right down the path there and not try to make up my own rules.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be back.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's. I don't know. He's got the microphone right.
It's a she.
She. Okay,
that's a she, by the way.
Oh, a heifer. I
Heifer's
forgot
gotta be
you
a she.
lived in a farm state up there.
Heifer's got to be a she. All heifers are she's.
I didn't know that. Well, we'll probably be back in a couple of weeks because I think you have to go on the rabbi tour. It's summer tour.
Summer tour,
Summer
right.
tour. So after that, we will be back with other great episodes.
Yes.
Of Jeff and the Rabbi.